In 2026, a question keeps echoing across tech forums, YouTube comments, Reddit threads, office Slack channels, and even corporate boardrooms. Is everyone switching to Linux? For decades, Windows dominated the desktop world so completely that most people never questioned it. Buying a computer meant getting Windows. Installing software meant checking if it supported Windows. Gaming meant using Windows. Work meant using Windows. It wasn't just an operating system, it was the default assumption. But something has shifted. Quietly at first, then suddenly all at once. Users started looking around and asking whether the old default still makes sense. The conversation is no longer about whether Linux can replace Windows. It's about why so many people are actually doing it. The real reason Windows users are leaving in 2026 is not just one thing. It's not a single update, not a single bug, not a single controversial feature. It's an accumulation of friction, tiny annoyances layered on top of each other for years. Forced updates at the worst possible times. Hardware requirements that make perfectly good machines feel obsolete overnight. Increasing integration of cloud services that not everyone asked for. Growing system complexity, more background processes. More telemetry. More ads inside what used to feel like a personal computer. For many users, it started to feel less like owning a tool and more like renting a constantly changing service. At the same time, Linux quietly matured. It didn't scream. It didn't run billion-dollar marketing campaigns. It just improved. Desktop environments became polished and visually refined. Installation processes became straightforward. Driver support expanded dramatically. Gaming compatibility made massive leaps forward. Application ecosystems filled in gaps that once felt impossible to bridge. What used to require command-line wizardry now often requires just a few clicks. And that quiet competence is powerful. When people try modern Linux in 2026, they are often shocked not because it feels experimental, but because it feels stable, smooth, and surprisingly complete. One of the biggest drivers of this shift is performance longevity. Many Windows users felt pushed into upgrading hardware not because their systems stopped functioning, but because official requirements and performance overhead kept creeping upward. In contrast, Linux often runs comfortably on older machines. Users install it on 5, 7, even 10-year-old laptops and watch them feel responsive again. Boot times shrink. Background activity calms down. Fans spin less. For people tired of constant hardware churn, this is transformative. It reframes the idea of what old hardware really means. Privacy concerns have also played a significant role. Over the years, mainstream users became more aware of data collection practices. Telemetry isn't a hidden technical term anymore. It's part of everyday conversations. Even if much of it is benign or anonymized, the feeling of constant background reporting unsettles some users. Linux, being open source, carries a different psychological weight. The transparency of code, the community-driven development model, and the absence of built-in advertising frameworks create a sense of control. Whether every user audits the code themselves is irrelevant. The knowledge that it can be audited changes the perception of trust. Then there is the customization factor. Windows has gradually moved toward a more controlled and standardized experience. That consistency benefits many people, but it can frustrate power users. Linux, on the other hand, thrives on flexibility. In 2026, distributions offer multiple desktop environments, theming engines, layout styles, and workflow philosophies. You can make your system minimal and distraction-free, or visually dramatic and animated, or closely resemble other operating systems for familiarity. For creators, developers, and enthusiasts, this flexibility feels empowering. Instead of adapting to the operating system, they shape it to match their workflow. Another reason people are leaving Windows is subtle but important: predictability. In corporate environments and home setups alike, unexpected system changes cause stress. Major updates sometimes rearrange settings, re-enable previously disabled features, or introduce compatibility quirks. Linux distributions, especially long-term support releases, tend to emphasize stability. Updates are frequent but typically less disruptive. Package managers handle software in a centralized way, reducing the chaos of downloading random installers from across the web. For many users, the system feels calmer and more transparent. Gaming used to be the ultimate argument against switching. For years, it was the fortress protecting Windows dominance. But by 2026, that fortress looks very different. Compatibility layers, translation technologies, and growing developer awareness have dramatically expanded the playable library on Linux. Major game engines increasingly support cross-platform deployment. Anti-cheat solutions that once blocked Linux users have adapted. While not every title runs flawlessly, the percentage of playable mainstream games is higher than ever. For many gamers, especially those who primarily play popular multiplayer or indie titles, the barrier has shrunk to the point where switching feels viable. Cost is another quiet motivator. Linux itself is free. That doesn't mean computers are free or that time has no value, but it removes licensing fees and reduces dependency on proprietary ecosystems. In regions where currency fluctuations make software pricing unpredictable, this matters even more. Students, freelancers, and small businesses benefit from the ability to deploy systems without additional licensing overhead. Combined with open-source productivity tools that have matured significantly, Linux can now support everyday workflows without forcing subscriptions. Developers have also been a driving force behind the shift. Modern software development heavily relies on tools that originated in Unix-like environments. Containers, scripting languages, server stacks, and cloud-native workflows often feel more natural on Linux. While Windows has improved its developer story considerably, many programmers prefer working directly in a Linux environment rather than through compatibility layers or subsystems. As more people learn to code and enter tech fields, Linux exposure increases. And once users become comfortable with it for development, they often choose it for daily computing as well. The cultural shift around open source has contributed too. Open source software is no longer perceived as fringe or hobbyist. It powers global infrastructure, enterprise servers, mobile devices, and cloud platforms. This mainstream legitimacy influences desktop adoption. When people realize that the internet's backbone runs largely on open technologies, the idea of using a Linux desktop feels less risky. It feels aligned with how modern computing actually works behind the scenes. There is also a psychological component to leaving Windows in 2026. Some users describe it as reclaiming control. Over time, computing moved from simple local programs to deeply integrated online ecosystems. Accounts sync across devices. Settings tie into cloud identities. Applications depend on web services. While convenient, this interconnectedness can feel overwhelming. Linux offers an alternative narrative. Your machine, your rules. You can still use cloud services, but they are choices, not mandatory pillars. That distinction resonates strongly with users who feel fatigued by constant digital integration. Corporate adoption patterns are shifting as well. Some organizations are exploring Linux desktops for cost control, security policies, or internal software standardization. Even if they don't fully replace Windows fleets, hybrid environments are becoming more common. Employees exposed to Linux at work gain familiarity. Familiarity reduces fear. Once fear disappears, experimentation increases. And experimentation often leads to permanent adoption when users realize their daily tasks are fully supported. Education has played a surprisingly important role in this transition. Many universities and technical institutes teach programming, networking, and cybersecurity using Linux systems. Students graduating in 2026 may have spent years interacting with Linux environments. When they purchase personal laptops, the idea of installing Linux doesn't feel exotic. It feels normal. This generational comfort is gradually reshaping the desktop landscape from the bottom up. Another often overlooked reason is simplicity of software management. Traditional Windows software installation involves downloading installers from websites, navigating setup wizards, and manually updating programs. In contrast, Linux package managers centralize software distribution. Updates for the system and applications arrive together. Dependencies are handled automatically. This model reduces clutter and improves consistency. Once users adapt to it, going back can feel messy and inefficient. Security narratives have also influenced perceptions. Windows has long been a major target for malware due to its market share. Although security has improved dramatically, the historical reputation lingers. Linux, with its permission model and lower desktop market share, is often perceived as safer. While no system is invulnerable, the sense of reduced exposure encourages experimentation. For users who experienced repeated malware infections or security scares in the past, Linux feels like a fresh start. The hardware ecosystem is evolving too. In 2026, more manufacturers ship devices either with Linux pre-installed or officially supported. Community compatibility lists have grown extensive. Driver support for graphics cards, Wi-Fi chips, and peripherals has improved significantly. The days of hunting obscure forum posts for basic functionality are largely gone for mainstream hardware. When installation becomes smooth and drivers just work, resistance drops sharply. Community support is another powerful factor. Linux forums, documentation wikis, and online communities are often detailed and collaborative. Users help each other troubleshoot issues in transparent ways. Solutions are documented publicly rather than hidden behind proprietary support tickets. This collective knowledge base builds confidence. When people know that answers exist and communities are active, they are more willing to switch. It's important to note that not everyone is switching. Windows remains dominant and deeply embedded in many workflows. Specialized enterprise software, certain professional creative suites, and legacy corporate tools still rely heavily on Windows environments, but the narrative has changed. Switching is no longer considered reckless or impractical. It is considered a valid, sometimes even strategic, choice. Cloud computing has also reduced operating system dependency. Many workflows now happen inside browsers. Email, document editing, project management, design collaboration, and communication tools are web-based. When your primary interface is a browser, the underlying operating system matters less. This abstraction lowers the cost of switching. If most of your daily tasks run identically across platforms, why not choose the one that aligns with your values or performance preferences? There is an environmental dimension as well. Extending the life of hardware by installing lightweight operating systems reduces electronic waste. As sustainability conversations grow louder in 2026, this argument gains traction. Reviving older machines instead of discarding them appeals to environmentally conscious users and organizations alike. The emotional tone around Linux has evolved too. It used to carry a stereotype of complexity and elitism. In 2026, the messaging is different. Tutorials are accessible. Installation guides are beginner-friendly. Graphical tools reduce reliance on command lines for routine tasks. While advanced users still enjoy deep customization, newcomers can navigate comfortably without touching a terminal. That shift in tone makes adoption feel welcoming rather than intimidating. Even aesthetics matter. Modern Linux desktops are visually refined. Smooth animations, high DPI support, dark mode consistency, and elegant design languages rival mainstream operating systems. For users who care about how their digital environment feels, this parity removes another psychological barrier. Another driver of migration is dissatisfaction with subscription models. As more software shifts to recurring payment structures, users look for alternatives. Open-source applications often provide robust functionality without mandatory subscriptions. This doesn't eliminate all paid software, but it expands the range of viable free tools. Over time, cost-conscious users calculate the savings and consider switching ecosystems. Remote work trends have further accelerated experimentation. When people set up home offices, they often configure new systems. That transitional moment becomes an opportunity to try something different. Without corporate IT restrictions on personal machines, individuals feel freer to install Linux and test its capabilities. Many discover that their workflow remains intact, and some decide never to return. The broader tech narrative in 2026 emphasizes decentralization and user empowerment. From decentralized social networks to privacy-focused messaging platforms, cultural momentum favors tools that distribute power rather than concentrate it. Linux aligns philosophically with that movement. Its governance models, community contributions, and transparent development processes resonate with users seeking alternatives to centralized control. Ultimately, the real reason Windows users are leaving is not hatred. It's evolution. Computing habits have changed. Expectations have shifted. Hardware life cycles are scrutinized more closely. Privacy awareness has grown. Development workflows favor Unix-like environments. Gaming barriers have weakened. The web abstracts platform differences. And Linux has matured quietly in the background, waiting for this convergence. In 2026, switching to Linux is less about rebellion and more about alignment. Users evaluate their needs and discover that Linux meets them. They realize they can browse, stream, code, game, edit documents, and communicate without friction. They notice their systems feel lighter and more responsive. They appreciate update transparency. They enjoy customization freedom. They value the absence of intrusive elements. And gradually, word spreads. Is everyone switching to Linux? Not literally. But enough people are switching to make the question feel real. Enough people are experimenting to create momentum. Enough developers are optimizing for cross-platform compatibility to reduce friction further. Enough gamers are reporting success stories to change perceptions. Enough students are graduating with Linux familiarity to influence future workplaces. The desktop landscape in 2026 is more pluralistic than ever. Instead of a single unquestioned default, there are viable choices. That alone represents a profound shift. For decades, alternatives existed but felt marginal. Now they feel credible. And credibility changes behavior. The story is still unfolding. Operating systems continue to evolve. Companies adapt. Communities innovate. But the surge of interest in Linux reflects something deeper than a temporary trend. It reflects a desire for control, longevity, transparency, and efficiency. It reflects fatigue with friction and appreciation for simplicity. It reflects a generation comfortable exploring options rather than accepting defaults. In the end, the migration from Windows to Linux in 2026 is not a mass exodus fueled by outrage. It is a steady flow driven by practicality. One user at a time installs a distribution out of curiosity. One old laptop gains a second life. One gamer discovers their favorite title runs smoothly. One developer decides they prefer native tools. One student realizes they don't need proprietary software for assignments. Individually, these choices seem small. Collectively, they reshape the narrative. And perhaps that is the most important shift of all. The conversation is no longer about whether Linux is ready. For millions of users in 2026, it already is.